Good morning, Bitcoiners. Good morning, Bitcoiners. Good morning, Rickster. I don't know what's up right now, but it is not really indicating people tuning into the live stream. Normally, I get a number at the top of my screen. I don't know what's going on. I see you, Rickster, because you left a comment, but give me a sign who's out there. There we go. Good morning, Team Christian. CK's here. Okay. Okay, here we go. Starting to get numbers in. Okay. Good morning, Daniel. Good morning, everyone. Glad you all made it. Glad you all made it. So, as you know, the sun is up and Bitcoin's running. I don't know if you guys noticed, right? But we're doing great. Right? So all that's left to do is have some coffee and talk about what's new. Today might be one of the most interesting days we've ever got the privilege to cover. It's pretty amazing what's going out there today. For Moscow time. Oh, one note before we get started. Today we're going to do the live show, but immediately when I'm done, I'm going to do two pre-records of Moscow time and a new little feature I call, the reason to break up today. So I'm going to repackage one of these arguments I'm making today into a quick 2-minute video. So I'll be sharing two 2-minute videos, which will be uploaded on Twitter, and I'll also upload on YouTube, which should be a super condensed version of this show, right? Balaji Srinivasan has inspired me to do the 2-minute version of my show. I'll see if I can do it, right? It's better than a minute. I had trouble with those shorts. The minute time frame's a little too slow. But please, wonderful audience who always comes and likes the live show. We're trying to get over some of these technical problems, audio, video, grow the channel. So please aggressively share the short clips that I'm going to be uploading today. Thank you. All right. So Woody Harrelson, who was on Saturday Night Live this week, started the cascade of our wonderful Moscow time today. Quick story on Woody Harrelson. There's a fellow who used to work for DCG. His name is Travis Shear. And he's with a fund now. I can't remember exactly what it's called. Pretty interesting guy, pretty into Bitcoin, if you will. And he typically spends his Christmas and New Year's holidays in Hawaii. And so over the years, he's told me all these stories. He goes to the same place. It's a friend of his, and he's got a house on it, and da-da-da. But it's literally Woody Harrelson's neighbor. And so Woody just like shows up all the time. They're total buddies. He comes, they like celebrate New Year's together every year. Apparently he's just the best guy, right? A lot of fun. And you got to respect him because for years he's been called crazy, especially in the early days. He was big into the cannabis, right? And everyone told him, oh, you're crazy, you're a drug addict, and all these other things. But here he is with an amazing monologue yesterday or 2 nights ago on Saturday Night Live. And here's what he said. The biggest drug cartels in the world get together and buy up all the media and all the politicians and force all the people in the world to stay locked in their homes. And people can only come out if they take the drug cartel's drugs and keep on taking them over and over. All right. I mean, we know what he's talking about, at least, right? Like, it's not out of nowhere, right? It's not this crazy thing. Well, what? Now, Saturday Night Live, if you guys are unaware, airs in America at 11:30 p.m. on Saturday nights. 11:30 p.m. Remember that, right? So what happened by 7 a.m. the following day, yesterday, Sunday? How many newspapers, how many magazines, how many news outlets have staff working between 11:30 on a Saturday and 7 a.m. on a Sunday? It's got to be few, right? It can't be a lot. Well, the proof here that barely anyone was working. However, they managed to create a copy paste headline across multiple publications to react to Woody Harrelson. So, first of all, Rolling Stone says Woody Harrelson spreads anti-vax conspiracies during Saturday Night Live monologue. Yesterday morning, published early. I took the screenshot at 7 a.m., something like that. The Daily Beast. Woody Harrelson spews anti-vax conspiracies and rambling SNL monologue. Wow, big yikes from Daily Beast. Huffington Post. Woody Harrelson about weed and anti-vax conspiracy and SNL monologue. So they're going with the weed. Remember the weed dig you can get on them. Variety. Woody Harrelson's monologue makes COVID conspiracy jokes. Remember what my challenge is in Moscow time, right? My challenge is I don't get to add a punchline. I just got to read the news straight to you. It's some pretty good Moscow time. It's pretty good, pretty good. Hard to beat that. That's as good as it gets. Now, the two big stories this weekend that we're going to cover. First is the Wall Street Journal, which has come out and said the lab leak most likely origin of COVID-19 pandemic. Energy Department now says. First of all, people commenting on the Energy Department piece, right? So everyone's saying, "Oh, Energy Department, what does that mean?" That's the first sort of rebuttal that we've had to what's going on. People saying, "Energy Department, what do they have to do with anything? It's the Energy Department." Dr. Andrew Huff, who's been following this stuff, said the following: "I am thoroughly enjoying reading the comments from all the people that do not understand what the role of the Department of Energy is in defense, national security, pandemics, biosecurity, and biowarfare mitigation, prevention, and response. The Department of Energy houses the national laboratory system, and a massive chunk of these programs operate in partnership with the three-letter agencies via CRADAS." Don't know what that is. "I worked at Sandia National Laboratories in these areas as a senior member of the technical staff." So what he's basically saying here is this is the most credible source of this information, right? So the most credible source of this information. Now, I tweeted in response to this yesterday that, of course, this is no surprise to Bitcoiners. Why is it no surprise to Bitcoiners? Is it because we have our own ability to forensically audit the history and source of COVID? Is it because we have scientists who are Bitcoiners that shared privileged information with us and we were able to navigate the labyrinthian complexities of the disease rollout? Obviously not, right? We didn't do any of those things. Why were Bitcoiners not surprised? Right? The reason is Bitcoiners already as a worldview don't follow the science, right? Follow the science is the stupidest sentence in the modern world today. Of course, science is a method of thinking. It's a framework, right? It's not a belief system. It's not a belief system. It's a system and a process by which you can analyze data that's in front of you. Sometimes you get a result, sometimes you don't, right? But you can draw conclusions from it, and that's the reason why the scientific method exists. It's not a belief system. And the problem with follow the science is it doesn't really predict, especially when we've known for years that the main trick of propaganda that Edward Bernays perfected. Now, we've talked about Edward Bernays a few times on this show. Edward Bernays was Sigmund Freud's nephew, right? So he was Sigmund Freud's nephew. He was around in the 1920s, 1930s, 1940s, 1950s, 1960s, heavily involved in American policy, heavily involved in American executive branch activities. He's the one who first popularized cigarette smoking for women by understanding that the problem women had with smoking was not so much problem they had with resisting being smokers in the 1920s, was because they would look like loose women, loose morals, that kind of thing. So what he showed was, and what he did was, he created a new framework for them by hiring a bunch of media, New York Times, all these others, and gave them a little teaser and said, if you come on July 4th, there was a parade. If you come on July 4th and sit at this corner, you're going to see women light torches of liberty, right? Light torches of liberty. So, of course, what happened was he hired all kinds of beautiful women to walk down Fifth Avenue for the July 4th parade, whatever year that was, early 20s. And the women pulled out cigarettes and lit them all up in front of the media, and beautiful women. And it turned into not an argument about you're a loose woman, licentiousness, all those other things. It turned into an element of freedom or not. Are you free to express yourself as a smoker or not? If you don't smoke, you're not free. And suddenly you had women who became massive tobacco consumers. And he followed that up with his bread and butter. His bread and butter from then on became get expert witnesses, expert testimony providers like doctors, right? Every time you hear 9 out of 10 doctors prefer this toothpaste, that's Edward Bernays. He realized that appeals to authority were one of the more psychologically persuasive frameworks that could be used. So from then on, he got Americans to do all kinds of things they would not have done otherwise. he was one of the instrumental parties in turning Americans into a consumer culture. Now, the reason it was done in the 1950s with Eisenhower was so that American consumer capacity would help maintain our industrial capacity in case we needed to pivot back to a war machine, because Eisenhower's intention was to demilitarize America. Now, we got the worst of both worlds. We ended up getting consumerism, and we offshored manufacturing and all of our industrial capacity to other places. And so we were left as consumers. So the reason why Bitcoiners understand more about follow the science and have our own framework to predict in the future is because we don't follow the science one. We see how corrupted it is. We see how scientists have been used for these appeals to authority according to the Edward Bernays framework. What we do in Bitcoin is follow the money, right? We follow the money. And if you follow the money, you'll have a more predictive frame than following the science. So when we heard all this stuff, oh, scientists say, remember the old NPR headline that is still up from April 22nd, 2020? Scientists debunk lab accident theory of pandemic emergence. They even had a podcast on it with a bunch of phony baloney sitting there saying, oh, there's no way. It had to have been just an accident. Someone ate a bat, right? You get Reuters. China lab rejects COVID-19 conspiracy claims. The China lab, wow, great. But virus origins still a mystery. Here's from the Washington Post. Tom Cotton keeps repeating a coronavirus conspiracy theory that was already debunked, right? So this is the typical system used in order to persuade people, right? Now, what we understood, because we can compare as Bitcoiners, the motivations when you do follow the money, the type of money you're following is important, really important. And the basis of the US dollar really is a marketing project. Every time we hear about Jerome Powell and the Fed Reserve and what did they say, and everyone trying to read the tea leaves, everyone trying to divine what he says, everyone trying to mind read anyone who's involved in the Fed Reserve to predict what's going to happen. We understand it's just a big language exercise, right? It's just a big language model. And people are trying to use that language model to tease out what's going to happen in the future. Now, Bitcoiners understand that the foundation of Bitcoin is actually engineering, it's the network, it's the fundamentals of the network. So they're built on two completely different foundations. And because of that, Bitcoiners have had a laser eye focus. When we see the laser eyes, it's not just about seeing a better future and Bitcoin coming. It's also to show that we can pierce through the veil. We understand that it is a marketing project, right? Even look at Hollywood, right? Now, the word Hollywood, right? Think about where it comes from. In a system of control that uses language, that uses persuasion, that uses psychological operations, it actually dates back to an ancient Druidic European system, which is where the wand conductor comes from, right? When you see a wand conductor in an orchestration, the point of that whole system is that the person conducting the orchestration using the wand gets people to dance, gets people to move, gets people to do things. But did you know what those wands were always made of? Right? You can even hear it if you watch Harry Potter. Right? It was a phoenix core, but the actual wand that Harry Potter used was made of holly. It was made of holly wood. Right? So Woody Harrelson, all these folks that are acquainted with these systems of persuasion understand these things, and Bitcoiners have understood it for a long time now. Right? That's the reason why we want a network built on verifiable and simple mathematics. Right? When you see that beautiful equation that denotes what Bitcoin is, the 21 million, the block reward, how it functions, right? That whole equation is so important because the mathematics of it help us induce a more a money that isn't relying on Hollywood persuasion, that isn't relying on marketing, that isn't relying on what Jerome Powell thinks and says, and what did that person think he said, and what do they think they say, and we're going to place a bet, and maybe he meant that. We've been interested, pardon me, we've been interested in getting away from this stuff for a long time, right? So when Bitcoiners first saw the pandemic come down and we saw this kind of stuff, it's not because of science that we understood. we understood very quickly that the reaction to it, the lockdowns, the constant fear, all of these things actually come from a playbook on how to manipulate and persuade people that everyone knows about. And it looks like this, right? This is the actual side book that has been used for years by intelligence agencies to infiltrate countries, to manipulate public opinion on various issues. And it's pretty dastardly. This is what it looks like. It's isolation, right? It's dependence, guilt, fear, disrupting sleep, depriving of natural light. Like these are the real levers that people have understood over time, that if you pull on these, you will get the result you want, right? You can induce almost any behavior if you do these things. If I was subjected to these, it would be very difficult to resist. In the end, all humans will be manipulated by this to a certain extent. And if you go back to the beginning of the pandemic, because most Bitcoiners are already aware of this stuff, right? They already understood the contrast between how the dollar functions, how the marketing apparatus behind it functions, and what Bitcoin is trying to propagate in the world, which is totally different, an engineering-based network, mathematically based, where the magic isn't in a wand being wielded this way. The magic is literally in the harnessing of these magical algorithms arranged in a beautiful way that produce the result that is Bitcoin, right? Remember, nothing in Bitcoin is new, right? Bitcoin was itself the constituent parts, not an invention. I use regularly the analogy of a bicycle to sort of explain the magic, right? When bicycles came about, nothing in a bicycle was new. Handlebars, wheels, chains, but the magic of the bicycle rolling on two wheels was new, right? And it was the particular orchestration of the technologies that allowed for this magical balance and forward propulsion to happen. And Bitcoiners understood right when you look at the invention that Satoshi came up with and you go, that's it. So simple, right? So elegant. It was the orchestration of technologies which already existed coming together and working this way that got everyone certain that something important had been invented and that this thing had a certain magic to it, and much more influential than the magic of a magic wand that is just psychological operations, right? You can start to see the incentives, the motivations in Bitcoin and how it could propel and work towards the future. So from that point on, Bitcoiners had a much more focused denigration, a much more focused criticism of what was going on with the marketing-based commodity that is the psychological commodity that is the US dollar. Because remember, World War III, what we're involved in right now as Bitcoiners, is a psychological and economic battleground, right? It is psychological and economic. And in the case of the dollar, the yuan, the Chinese system, what's going on in Russia, and Bitcoin, these are all psychological commodities. That's why they are the battleground of World War III, because they fuse both the important elements of World War III, right? Psychological and economic. So Bitcoiners understood that all of this was going to be deployed and had to be deployed because, or that if the relationships that went into making money, US dollars, right, would continue to be motivated in that way. The incentives would be there. And it ended up looking a lot like this. This looks exactly like social media addiction around COVID, right? All the people that were in despair, watching the videos, what did Fauci say, watching the news, the body count, all of those things were telltale signs of psychological manipulation. They were not telltale signs of trying to get people working together to get over a pandemic. Right? They didn't look like that at all, right? People coming together to get over a pandemic looks completely different. Now, I'm not saying there wasn't a real virus. It looks like there was a real virus. It escaped from a lab, and I would understand why lots of people would be afraid in the early days. The death counts were real, right? People did die of this thing. It was a real thing. And now, to what extent, nobody will ever know. I don't think. There's no way to tell, right? Everything's been lost within this psychological manipulation. But Bitcoiners understood right away. That's why Bitcoin 2021, the event that Bitcoin Magazine held June 2021, was the first event on Earth. On Earth, planet, the whole thing, all the continents. The first event on Earth coming out of COVID to have people come together indoors, not wear masks, not worry about any of this shit, right? There was no more isolation. People were coming together. And that's why I still believe that event will go down in history if we win everything, which it looks like we're going to. We're going to get to that. But that was the first ever time where people came together and ignored the psychological manipulation. They ignored the marketing behind the US dollar incentive based system, which was creating this global pandemic, right? So Bitcoiners already then had a leg up. We had the least amount of psychological adjustment to what was going on in the pandemic. We had the least amount of reorienting what we were doing with our life. Now, our lives changed individually, all of us. I changed, everyone changed. There were ways we didn't even perceive we needed to change, and we did, right? I was still going to restaurants a lot, even though I was trying to eat better pre-pandemic, and I was still healthy. I'm blessed. I have a good system. I can. It seems like I can process as much of the toxic sludge that fiat serves people. I'm lucky, right? That's for me. But I can notice the difference now that I eat clean, that I keep a much healthier schedule, a much better way of living, and that's all that happened with Bitcoin and even resisting almost all these other psychologically manipulative forums like movies and television shows and Netflix. By the way, did you know Netflix, the one of the two founders of Netflix, is Edward Bernays' nephew, the same guy I just discussed as one of the major psychological persuaders in our history? It's his nephew. It's his real legit. His name is Bernays, right? The guy who created Netflix. I don't remember his name off the bat right here, but he is an actual Bernays. There you go. Netflix and chill, right? Netflix and chill. From there, right? From there, we can start thinking about how follow the money predicts much better than follow the science, and I'll explain why. First of all, now that we have this confirmation, right? You get war clandestine, who we've been talking about a lot, saying we have a new phase of the COVID saga. The US government is starting to slowly admit that human-engineered pathogen that leaked from a lab in China. This is essentially the end of the road for the COVID narrative. Now, the narratives are important. We've talked about narrative bias. Human brains function in a way that we learn stories much better than facts, right? Like, you can't read a phone book, right? If you guys remember what a phone book is. We don't read phone books, right? They're really hard, really boring. That's like an insult, right? That book reads like a phone book, right? Stupid. It's like a textbook. Doesn't make any sense. Boring. But people understand when things are put in narrative form much easier, right? And this is known by many. So War Clandestine goes and he starts making predictions. This is the death knell for the globalists. Why? Because the broader public are now emboldened to ask more questions. Who made it? Who leaked it? Why did the mainstream media and tech lie? Why did the U.S. government censor anyone who suggested this over the last 3 years, right? Just like what we saw with Woody Harrelson this weekend. Look at the quick turnaround to shit on Woody Harrelson. Woody Harrelson. Like, he's a guy on Saturday Night Live. And they had to get multiple headlines calling it vax conspiracy, anti-vax conspiracy, right? Here's War Clandestine. The Biden men are already trying to get in front of it. NSA Jake Sullivan on the origin of SARS-CoV today. President Biden has directed repeatedly every element of our intelligence community to put effort and resources behind getting to the bottom of this question. Anyone with a pulse can tell you that Jake Sullivan, 46, is lying through his teeth. Not only has the Biden administration not pursuing the answers to COVID, the intelligence community conspired with big tech to censor the people who have been saying this for 3 effing years. He said for 3 effing years, right? Russia and China have formally alleged, but of course you're not going to see this stuff. Come through. But the follow the money aspect did have a big update this weekend. And what was it? Well, we found out from numerous sources. That, let me get it here. We found out from numerous sources that Fauci himself made, and we get this from Moderna, reporting its profits for the year, tax season, right? So you get a lot of information as these taxes become obvious. I'm finding it here. Where did I put it? Well, it turns out $400 million in royalties were paid. $400 million in royalties were paid to Moderna, of which Fauci is a beneficiary, right? So follow the money here looks like it indicts many of the major players. Rand Paul's been asking about this in the Senate for quite a while. He says, "You refuse to answer whether anybody on the vaccine committees gets royalties from the pharma industry. When we get in charge, we're going to change the rules and you will have to divulge where you get your royalties from." So now they're having to divulge where they get their royalties from. And even Elon Musk weighed in and said, yeah, he did it via a pass-through organization, Eco Health, right? So this is both the funding of gain of function and so the funding of gain of function in it looks like it's clear. Eco Health, Fauci, part of it. And now the part where they got royalties looks like it's clear from this weekend. Dr. Simone Gold says Moderna paid an organization previously headed by Fauci $400 million in royalties for vaccine sales. The payment was reported by the industry watchdog Fierce Pharma as well as by the New York Times. The corruption is deep. War Clandestine adds, wow, Moderna earnings release yesterday shows a $400 million payment to NIAID, which is one of the 27 institutes that makes up the NIH. In other words, the Fauci-led NIH were receiving kickbacks for the vaccines. Conflict of interest. So we see follow the money has predicted much, much better than any follow the science, right? Just like Bitcoiners got together in Bitcoin 2021 in Miami, right? Just like we got together the year after and this year, Bitcoiners have the least amount of adjustment for our worldview because it's not based on marketing. It's not based on changeable words, right? The definition of words, what words you choose and what words I choose. I mean, 99% of arguments that exist today on the internet, online, are just people arguing about definitions of words. What's a woman? What's a this? What's a that? Right? It's just people's definitions. There's no way that you can ever resolve any of this stuff because it's just words. It's just the definition of words, which is what makes Bitcoin so different. We're not arguing about words. There's no arguing about a mathematical formula. It is 100% predictive. 100% predictive versus the wishy-washy, mushy orchestration with a wand, get you to do things, get you to dance, right? It's a totally different system. Now, where is it supposed to go from here? Right? We get War Clandestine saying it's going to get people to ask more questions. Yes, indeed, right? But there's a few things happening at once, right? We've got China, who's saying they're going to create energy markets in yuan, traded in Shanghai. How much of that is actually going on? We don't know, right? We're trying to follow the money here because after everything that happened in Ukraine, right, we've seen a schism in the monetary system in the world because not everyone's gone along with this orchestration. Not everyone is listening to Hollywood this time, right? Not everyone is listening to what the people behind the US dollar and the marketing efforts to propagate that system have to say about what's going on in the whole world. We've seen breakaway systems with Russia, conflict, and China, and what's going on there. So at the same time, China, right, saying they're going to oppose this stuff, has its own economic problems, a ton of them, right? The amount of people that actually live there, the type of economy they have, the corruption of the real estate market looks just way worse than anything we have in America, right? Meanwhile, you get Russia yesterday, Vladimir Putin saying, together with our partners, we will continue to work on the formation of a stable, secure system of international settlements independent of the dollar and other Western reserve currencies, which, with such a policy of Western elite and Western rulers, will inevitably lose their universal character. Right? So he's predicting that the U.S. hegemonic system for settlement, especially in energy, is ending. Right? Maybe. At the same time, you've also got this guy, urban cowboy, Michael Cow. Right? I'll recommend him, right? I'm going to say he's a real idiot right now. He's a moron. He's one of the dumbest people I've read in a long time. him and a Canadian, Michael St. Pierre, got together and presented a paper to West Point saying, it's finally out. This is the paper I co-wrote and presented at West Point in this past February 9th. It is entitled US Dollar Primacy in an Era of Economic Warfare. All right, so the US dollar primacy in an era of economic warfare. And what does he say in this paper, right? So we're making predictions now. We're doing a follow the money analysis, right? So it looks like things changed after COVID, right? We saw Russia, China, everything changing. Russia and China believe there's a new competitive system coming. And as we said, World War III is an economic and psychological war. But what does he say, right? Here's what he says. It's funny. It's pretty funny. U.S. national security is now firmly focused on the great power competition and how to reorient policies to face the country's challengers. Competition with China in particular is now front of mind, but the list of additional challengers will likely grow. Here's what he says. This is where he shows that he's probably dumb and lacks IQ. The US-led rules-based order. The US-led rules-based order is what he says, right? That's the standard he's just provided, right? The US-led rules-based order is changing in an increasingly multipolar world. Nevertheless, US officials continuously restate that the rules-based order must be defended. This dumb fuck is trying to tell you what, like, without even a bit of humility, that America is the rules-based order at this point, with what we've got in the White House, with the, I mean, we've got a criminal in the White House, an actual criminal, for real criminal, right? We've got stolen elections, right? No one believes more. We talked the other day about the formula behind a color revolution and on America. What's a color revolution? A color revolution formula invented by these who brought you this type of stuff, right? The color revolution is make an election incredulous and then fund one side with propaganda about morality and good and bad, freedom versus not. So the formula that has been exported by America for the last 20 years, it's behind all of the Arab Spring stuff. It's all over the place, right? The fingerprints of the color revolution system are everywhere now. Anyone can see it. They were turned on us in America, right? Anyone who believes that America had a coup on January 6th is as dumb as Michael Cow and believes that we're still in a rules-based order. We're not in a rules-based order. That's long gone. We're in a marketing and persuasion and psyop order on all sides. No one's saying China's the good guy here. Russia's not the good guy either, right? Everyone is doing psyops now. Everyone is using these systems in order to manipulate people. That's what's going on all over the place at a scale we've never seen before, right? Now, we can say all of these things, you know, everyone talking about the Bukele video this weekend about the criminals and the MS, whatever they're called, the gangs and everyone with the tattoos and just watching how disciplined they were and everyone shocked. Oh my goodness, right? You see all the NGO people, oh, what's going on here, right? Guess what, guys? There is no rules-based system, right? We've allowed a ton of corruption in our system, a ton, all over the world because of the nature of our money. It's the nature of our money that has created this system. And because how many people make money off the cartels? How many people make money off of the war on drugs, right? There isn't a lot of motivation out there to stop it. If we wanted to stop it, we could have a long time ago. But we don't have the will, we don't have the coordination, we don't have the incentives to work together, just like we don't have the incentives to work together to stop a pandemic, and that all we have are leeches and parasites sucking money out of the system because it's all just fiat, right? Again, it's called fiat, which is literally dictates from your mouth, words that you say. That's why the foundation are psyops. They're naturally that. That's what they are. They've been like that for a long time. And so we could solve it if we had the incentive structure correct, if we had the right motivations, it would be elementary for us to stop the war on drugs or to stop the drug pervasion in America, right? War on drugs was never the right way to frame it, right? It's not a war. It's literally take care of young people, help the broken families, get education, right? That's the formula to get away from drugs. It's not go fight people on every street corner and ignore the flow of drugs from China to Mexico and across the borders. And anyone who's even telling you that border security is the big thing about drugs, they're also lying to you, right? They're also lying to you. That's not true. Fixing the border and building a wall is not going to keep us from drugs. Not even close. Not even close. So what happened in El Salvador, right? What's going on in El Salvador? I bet you those criminals were subjected to this same formula by Bukele. It looks like it, right? Now, what do you think about it, right? Is it good or bad? It's not good, but what are we supposed to deal with here? We're in reality. This is not word thinking world anymore. This is not, oh, I wish the rules based order can be preserved because the words sound nice. That is fiat thinking, right? Trying to replace solutions to problems with more words is not going to get us anywhere. Now, were there some people innocently manipulated and turned into these robots? Yeah, I would imagine. I don't think he got it 100%. I think there's definitely some sad stories in there. But we're in a psychological and economic war, and these folks are victims any way you put it, right? We're not done with the victims of the psychological and economic warfare that's raging around the world. So to imagine that they can go on the Bitcoin standard and then suddenly have magic words that can persuade people ain't going to happen, right? That's not how it's going to work. What he does have is people who are able to now live a free life, and it looks like education is getting taken care of. And that really is the only priority. It's education, right? Bitcoiners are the greatest educators in the world. Our show in Miami, May 18th to 20th, we're going to have so many educators there, Bitcoin educators, people who are interested in education policy and how to change it, homeschoolers, right? We've got Saifedean and Corey DeAngelis. Corey DeAngelis is the largest charter school, homeschool organizer in America. He's just gone on a campaign where he's destroyed the most insidious, systemically racist groups in America, the teachers' unions and the various boards of education in the country that do nothing but pollute minds and create a fertile ground so that people run right into this formula here and then and require more assistance, right? So what we see now is let's think again about what Michael Cow said, right? Rules-based system, U.S. weaponized, U.S. dollar weaponized in order to beat back opponents. Maybe. But his whole premise here is that we're still fighting for the good guys. I mean, Michael, you're retarded. You're dumb. If that's what you think, if you think any Bitcoiner is going to push for a Fauci system, for a Biden system, get real. And it's not just us. There's a lot of people who are pissed. No one is going to follow these morons any longer. No one is ever going to believe this is a rules-based system, that our courts mean anything, that any of this stuff matters anymore. The myth people are waking up to is that democracy comes from, that democracy can produce freedom. It's not the same thing, right? Democracy does not produce freedom. We produce freedom in the way we live. That's it. That's all there is to it. And if you hold Bitcoin and you reject taxation, you reject the democratic systems, you are more free. You are more free, right? Freedom of speech is expensive. Being free is expensive. And it only gets paid in Bitcoin. That's the cost of freedom, right? I spend Bitcoin in order to stay away from any of these blood-sucking parasites so that I can live my own life, speak to you guys freely as I can, do my best, right? We're trying to educate. We're trying to use a P2P model here. We're doing our best to spread information, spread knowledge, fight back the psyops, and we're getting somewhere. Bitcoin's growing. They tried to kill it again. We didn't die. We're doing great, right? We're going to do much better now that we've got all this enthusiasm from artists and creators. Right? We need these people. Right? Anyone who's telling you about the block size and they know and da da da, boo hoo hoo. Right? We need enthusiastic creators to jump into Bitcoin and make money. Our system must make people rich. We got to make the energy companies rich. Right? The way for us to win this is everyone's debating about what's going to be the settlement for energy. We're the settlement for energy. Right? The reference for energy is going to be Bitcoin. Bitcoin to as water is to the metric system, Bitcoin will be to the energy system. Water, the properties of water are what were translated into into the metric system, right? 100 became the number at which it boils, 0 the number at which it freezes. And everything from there was used to create a meter from a liter, right? All of our measurements, everything comes from the actual properties of water because they're consistent. They don't change. That's what makes it useful. Bitcoin also consistent. It doesn't change. That's what makes it useful. That's what makes it a good psychological reference for the most valuable commodity we have going now, energy. And we're going to create a system where, when they first created these energy systems 100 years ago, and 100 years ago when they first created the trolleys, the trolley Dodgers, the Los Angeles Dodgers, the baseball team, their name comes from Brooklyn because there were so many, they were in Brooklyn before. There were so many trolleys that you had to dodge the trolleys, right? Now, the trolleys were free because the electricity was free. And at the end of the line, you'd go and there'd be these huge light shows because they had to get rid of all the excess energy. This is what happens when you don't live on a fiat standard. When you live on a gold standard and you live on a system that doesn't require marketing and psychological persuasion to propagate itself, you get that kind of stuff. And we're going to get there again. We're going to have so much energy. We're going to have so much abundant energy that we're going to be great. So what's going on here? You got banned, Justin? Oh no. Ranked choice with voting data on a blockchain should be a standard for democracy and republic. Otherwise, the vote will be gamed and rigged or hacked, and the popular vote is a minority consensus issue. Yeah, I mean, what you see in Arizona is pretty dastardly, right? It turns out they ordered. Now, here's a fun. The simulation has given us a thing. I don't know what's going on there, but it looks like Katie Hobbs, the governor. Remember the governor, the one who won, right? We covered the Arizona election heavily on this show. The girl, the woman who was in charge of the Arizona midterm election was the Secretary of State at the time, and she ran for the Democrat governor. I mean, one of the most boring, stupid-looking, dumb-sounding people you're ever going to hear in your life, right? Moronic uptalk. I think we're going to have a great time. And she was against Carrie Lake, who I think is one of the most persuasive speakers I've ever heard, right? Just incredible. So apparently this Katie Hobbs won, right? And we found out there was all kinds of trouble with the elections. No one followed any of the rules. Ballots could have been slipped in because they didn't ever have a chain of custody count. Who knew? It turns out, though, go back to April 1st, might have been March 1st, the very start of the pandemic, they ordered the most, I forget the number, but the most machine ballot counting, the most ballot counting machines we've ever had in America when it was still illegal to do so in Arizona. So a lot of people now think, a lot of people putting it together think it looks like this, right? Trump was impeached in 2020, January, for his conversations with Zelensky. Right? What was the reason for it? Right? He was trying to do a quid pro quo, right? Which I think is normal. If an American president, just like Katie Hobbs, had to manage the integrity of the elections, Trump had a job to manage the integrity of the elections in the same way Katie Hobbs did. And if he thinks one candidate is getting blackmailed because of Hunter Biden in Ukraine, well, it's his job to find out, right? So you tell me what's going on. And of course, they didn't do it. Zelensky did not help the Trump administration. They got impeached. That didn't really work. Within weeks, we were in a pandemic. Some people think it might have the lab leak, Wuhan, whatever, right? But there are labs in Ukraine, I'm told. And From there, right, within weeks, you get the color revolution formula. We had a incredulous election in America. I knew it was going to be incredulous the whole summer. I said, no one's going to believe this election. We're not going to have results. There's no result coming, right? And from there, you had the setup of January 6th, right? The insurrection. And here we are. Here we are, right? Rules based system, they say. Yeah, right. I wonder what happened, Justin. YouTube lets me chat finally. Voting on the blockchain is not as straightforward. Yeah, I'm not getting closer, but hard to achieve verifiable, unique vote. Yeah, I think it's, yeah, I think James is about to say it. Hand counted and or mechanical counted ballots with ballot images on blockchain with privacy in mind. Nah, I'm going right back to the Israeli way. Screw it. We don't need convenience here. We need credibility. You go to a room and you vote, and that's the end of it. The votes are counted there, right? No chain of custody, none of that shit. We don't have to create a system so that old people can vote a month in advance. Get out of here. We're done. We're done with the old people when it comes to their convenience for voting, right? They're too busy getting run over by this stuff that it just doesn't matter, right? So, but don't hold your breath, guys. Do not. I think the next one has to be double fraud on all sides. I think if Trump can get there, I don't know who it's going to, but whoever it is, they have to just simply do the ballot harvesting faster, better, and stop complaining that you're getting beat at that game, because that's the game now. That's the game, right? It's not a rules-based order; it's a scam. So you gotta adapt, right? You gotta adapt. Yeah, make voting a holiday. I'm totally fine with that. Yeah, it always should have been a holiday. I don't understand why it's not a day off, and it absolutely should be. And I would expect that. All right, team. I went on a little long. I got to do the recordings. Please share the 2-minute recordings I'll be uploading later. I think they'll do. I think they'll help us do really well and grow the channel, right? Which we like. As time goes by, I think 80% chance 2020 is rigged by data manipulation. 2016 was rigged by interstate cross checks. Yeah, I don't think we're ever going to know exactly how, because the truth is, was it the hardware? Was it the software? No one knows. There was never any forensic auditability of the system. And so who's qualified to do it? I don't know. I mean, I don't think you're gonna have to. I don't think you're gonna have to. I don't think we're gonna have to know. Woody Harrelson opened a cannabis dispensary in Santa Monica Boulevard. Follow the money? Yeah, of course. I mean, for sure. Yeah, it's turtles all the way down, though. Fraud. Yeah. But as I said, right, follow the money. Much more predictive than follow the science. Much more. And as long as we keep following the money, we're going to know how to orient ourselves, right? So forget about what machines were manipulated and all that stuff, right? We don't care. The point is to try and figure out people's incentives just based on who's making money, right? How much money did Fauci make? Is he credible? No. Right? That's all you need to know. All right, team. Peace.